What better way to get back into the habit of reading and reacting to terrible reviews for horror movies than to do it with 2010's A Nightmare on Elm Street? Let's go. Hey, what is up, everybody? It's Nick here from the Lost River Drive-In, and tonight I'm going to be reading and reacting to terrible reviews for A Nightmare on Elm Street. But there's a little bit of a twist here. I'm also going to do a segment where I read overwhelmingly positive reviews for this movie, because this movie is widely hated. This is probably the most divisive remake of the big three remakes. And by divisive, I mean like 90% of people say they don't like this movie or they absolutely hate this movie. Now, if you know me, you know I'm not one of them. I'm actually someone that mildly enjoys A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010. So it's kind of perfect that you guys asked me to do this, and it's one of the ones I actually like. So I can't wait to get into some bad reviews about a movie that a lot of you watching also don't like. And yeah, this should be fun, right? What could go wrong? So starting off on the right foot, we have a half-star review from Chris H. And Chris says, "This movie is beyond bad. Even the special effects feel tired. This movie did everything it could to rip off the others. Even the quote, 'You're in my world now, bitch,' from Freddy vs. Jason. This movie is bad in all areas, and the guy playing Freddy is horrible and looks ridiculous. Movie is gutter at best." I gotta say, Chris, even as someone that likes this movie, you've got some points. Parts of this remake absolutely do feel uninspired. There's some questionable CGI, for sure. However, though, I just can't get behind Jackie Earle Haley being bad. I've always said, and I've been happy to see in recent years a lot of people say, Jackie was fine in this movie. If anything, it was the dialogue he was written and the CGI that they had on his face, whatever the hell that was. He looked like a dead cat. But yeah, I mean, so you got some points, Chris. I'll hear you there, but I can't go that far with Jackie. Gaming U gives it a half star and says, "Wish I could give this movie no stars." All right. Flick F gives it 1.5 stars and says, "This movie is just bad. Jackie Earle Haley did an amazing job as Freddy Krueger, and some of the gore was good." Okay, hey, we're off to a good start. But those are the only things good about this movie. This movie is a disgrace to the franchise with its terrible writing, cheap jump scares, and the terrible direction they went with Freddy Krueger. All right, so shout out to Flick F for giving Jackie Earle Haley his props and mentioning the gore. I agree on those points. I also do agree that there is some questionable writing and a lot of cheap jump scares in this movie. And I agree with the direction they took Freddy, but for a different reason. I think the poster here is upset that they made Freddy, not necessarily a child killer, but something else. And I was upset that they didn't go with the he's innocent angle. So I will agree, we're definitely not agreeing on the same reasoning behind it, but I didn't really like the ultimate direction of Freddy in the movie either. Bria L comes in with a half star and says, "I hate reboots. This is no exception. I sneer at people that think this rendition of Nightmare on Elm Street is acceptable. Turning Freddy into a child, is too much. This reboot should have never been made." Okay, so I can't even say those words on YouTube. My video would get flagged and probably taken down or demonetized at the very least, so I'm not going to say it. You guys can fill in the blanks. I just feel like you have the wrong mindset there, though. So hating reboots entirely, I feel like you're just never going to give any reboot a chance because you've already decided that reboots are just inherently lesser and unnecessary and you hate them. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I also don't like when people say things like, "I sneer at the people that think this rendition is acceptable." That kind of stuff is so elitist and gatekeeping. There's this thing in this community, and it was actually very prevalent for a long time, and it's actually seemed to change in recent years, where we were like the community that was like, "Nah, dude, like what you like. Like, it's totally cool. Like, nobody cares because we're all nerds here, and we all like some bad movies, and we have nostalgia for certain things." The gatekeeping mentality and like elitist bullshit, it has no place in the horror community. Just none. Like, if people like something, whatever. I mean, I have so many friends that like movies that I think are just dog water. And I know some of you guys that are subscribed and watching right now like me, but, some of my takes to you are dog water. And I totally get that. But we're accepting of that because this community is that way. So yeah, get your elitist ass out of here.
Why are you screaming? I haven't even caught you yet.
The Elijah S. gives it a half star and says, "This isn't the way I remember his face." I'm sorry. You don't remember his face as a Kitty burn victim? Heather S. comes in with a half star and says, so much wrong with this film. But I'll give you my top 3. I love Katie Cassidy, but who convinced her that she could play an 18-year-old girl? All right, stop. We're going to take these on one by one. First of all, don't you dare utter a bad word about Katie Cassidy, okay? She is the best in this movie, aside from Kyle Gallner, and she should have been the final girl, not Rooney Mara. Okay, next point. Freddie, didn't spell it right. Now I'm thinking of Freddy from Halloween Resurrection.
Trick or treat, motherfucker.
Freddy coming through the wall in the original was fantastic. It's been replaced by really awful and obvious CGI. Absolutely true. And finally, someone please tell me why Freddy looks like a horribly burned Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Disappointing. Avoid at all costs. Yeah, I agree. You know, the makeup job and CGI on Freddy's not great in this movie, but I think we're talking about the wrong Freddy. Glitched G comes in with 1 star and says, "Thanks to this abomination, we will likely never see a true legacy sequel in honor of Wes Craven." Wow. Okay. For such a short review, there's a lot to unpack there. 1, I don't want to see a legacy sequel. I really don't want to. I feel like a lot of the Nightmare fan base doesn't either. That's not the direction they'd want to go. Let's build out with something new. Let's set up for 5 more movies, you know? Why go back to the past when you're only going to be able to get into that bag of tricks one time? But again, just my opinion. And 2, no. It's not thanks to this movie. This movie made over $100 million. That was not the problem here. The problem is the rights and the Craven estate. Don't blame the remake. Zoe V gives it 1 star and says, "Let me clarify. I do not have any issues with reboots." Okay, you're already better than Bria. But why fix what's not broken? Why, oh why, did they change the Freddy's mask design? Just no. Story is good, but this fundamental design change is unacceptable. I really hope we will see the good old Freddy again, but not in this form. Okay, so weird, because if you're not against reboots, why would you follow it up with why fix something that isn't broken? I mean, most reboots, if not all reboots, are derived from a classic original film or a classic series. So, couldn't you make that argument for everything? And then if that's your argument, then you never need a reboot. So, yeah. But if that's the only reason that they list for giving it 1 star is the design of Freddy Krueger, I feel like you got to expand more on that. I agree with you. I don't like the design either. But you've got to expand more on that. Alec P comes in with a half-star review and says, "Apparently this was made without Wes Craven's consent. If that doesn't trigger you enough, the contents of this film will. Bastardizing the beloved Freddy Krueger and demolishing everything that made the original Nightmare on Elm Street so memorable into a soulless wreck of a film that shouldn't even exist. But here it is to stay. Regretfully." Wow, this person really was dramatic in their review. You don't need the consent of the original creator. I mean, how many times have we seen that? I mean, we saw it with Halloween. We saw it with Friday. Most of the time, they don't really play a huge role or any role at all in it, aside from just, what, do you want an attaboy? That's all at the studio level, rights and everything like that. That has nothing to do with the original creator. Also, most original creators would say no if they had the choice, because they're no, don't do that. My movie is superior. They wouldn't want someone to have a chance to make a better movie than theirs. It's not about bastardizing it. But I do read in this very dramatic review, I feel like it has to do with what they changed about Freddy Krueger, what we mentioned earlier. Guys, I know a lot of people didn't like it really being heavy-handed in this movie, but that was the original intent, and it's hinted at throughout the series. Wes Craven just didn't spell it out, but this ain't new.
Did you know that after the heart stops beating, the brain keeps functioning for well over 7 minutes?
Boomstick C says, What happens when you take a classic masterpiece of reality warping dream bending and replace it with a badly written music video style edited, highly glossy remake? You get a movie with little to no imagination or staying power or soul. Wow. 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 These people are really, really dramatic in some of these reviews. Video style editing for sure. Music video style. I mean, Samuel Bayer was the director. He was a music video director. It makes total sense. It is very glossy. Totally agree with that. But saying it has no imagination, I just can't get behind that. I mean, you've got added wrinkles in here that are definitely different. You know, you automatically think of the micro naps. You think about changing the lore of Freddy Krueger. You think about, for 3/4 of the movie, playing up that maybe he was innocent. There's some imagination here. Now, whether the dialogue they wrote and the performances that were reading those lines of dialogue were any good, well, that's up for you to decide. But there was some imagination here. Shane F. gives it a 0.5 star and says, basically unwatchable for hardcore Freddy fans. They did us dirty. Man, the drama tonight at an all-time high. Again, gotta expand upon that more, buddy. I can't just roll with that. Give me some reasons. But also not true, because the most hardcore Freddy fan I know is Christian Hannah Horror, and he does not find this movie to be an abomination. So you don't speak for everybody, Shane, even when you yell it. Liam S. gives it 1 star and says, probably one of the worst remakes ever made. Not a patch on the original. I've never heard that phrase before. That's interesting. Not a patch on the original. Okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all right. I'm sorry you feel that way. Okay, so we got our first great one. Ryan J gives it a 0.5 star and says, terrible. Don't recommend, but watch if you must. 1.2 out of 10. Yes, we're back to the decimals. Let's go. Parker F comes in with 1.5 stars and says, a soulless, boring, scareless remake of Wes Craven's brilliant classic that wastes Rooney Mara's acting talents and the efforts of the VFX team. Okay. Rooney Mara is a good actress. But how dare you say that about her pertaining to this film? Her acting talents weren't wasted in this film. Rooney forgot to pack them up in her fucking bag before she arrived on set. Okay? She left those motherfuckers at home on purpose because she didn't care. That ain't the creative team's fault. That's Rooney's fault.
Do you think you can bring the dead back to life?
No.
No! I didn't fucking think so.
Mateo L gives it 1.5 stars and says my rating for the film is a 3.7 out of 10. So, decimals and no reasons why. Hell yeah, Mateo. This will be the last bad one we read because most of these are going to be bad. So we'll do a couple good ones after this one, but I wanted to pick an especially dramatic one. This is from Anon Shitposter. You guys know by now, if you've been watching this series, that just means somebody anonymous. 0.5 star. This is literally one of the worst movies I have ever seen. It completely ruins the source material that inspired this film. Jackie Earle Haley ruins the role of Freddy Krueger by watering down his jokes to P-word like quotes. Again, you guys from earlier in the video. They changed the awesome visual effects from the original and used awful CGI. They also did not ask Wes Craven about making the remake, which I find rude. Whew, okay. Again, man, you got... Jackie Earle Haley didn't write the dialogue. He didn't write the dialogue. That's what I'm saying. Like, I gave y'all that. I gave y'all that years ago. But I also did earlier in this video. If you didn't like the dialogue for Krueger or the look of Krueger, totally get it. But with what he was given to work with, Jackie Earle Haley did fine. Also, yeah, of course, his dialogue would lean into that side of Freddy because this movie is trying to play up that side of Freddy. Now let's switch it up. Let's read some overly positive reviews of this film to end this video. Christian A gives it 5 stars. This might be Christian, guys. And says, beautifully shot. Not as well as Wes told it, but the cinematography really bring and darker sense of realism. God, my head. Should have stuck to the original script. There is so much potential to revive this franchise with today's technology. We just need the right director. Rob Zombie is not it. Bring on Fede Alvarez. Okay, nice jab at Rob Zombie. It's definitely not Christian, guys. I do feel like you're being a little kind there. But hey, that's cool. We got our first great one. Stephanie T gives it 5 stars and says, I am a huge Fred head. The original is my favorite movie of all time. I loved this remake. An absolute fresh take with the balls to take the franchise in a much darker direction. I loved the twist, how he was almost innocent. I liked they went down the dark alleys they traversed. Good gore, mostly special effects, except the wall shot, ugh, and damn fine acting. A fantastic film all the way around. So, it's great to hear somebody that's a huge Freddy fan be so positive about this movie. I do agree on some of your points about having the balls to take it in a much darker direction, but they undercut themselves. So they had the balls to pretend like they were going to, but they didn't deliver upon that. So we can't, that's almost a wash. At best, it's a wash. We can't give them credit, but we can't hold it against them. So it's kind of incomplete on that. And I agree that they did kind of explicitly lean into some things about Freddy to really flesh this guy out and, really paint him as the monster that he is. But at the same time, I understood why that was jarring for a lot of people. And because it's just not something that had been super explicit. A non-shitposter comes in with 5 stars and says, it's my favorite horror film for one major reason. And more studios should not listen to toxic idiots from the 70s who get offended by remakes. Because if every classic horror film did this, horror wouldn't be a dead genre. So it's basically the original, verbatim. It's not a reboot, it's a remake. And not like Footloose where they changed it to a more modern country theme. It's the exact same as the original, but with better SFX, CGI, acting, sound design, etc. If you like the original but not this, you're a biased hypocrite and your opinion should be invalid. Okay, that's crazy. That's crazy. There's so much wrong with that. It started with me trying to read your review. Glad you love it, though. So what's the general consensus for A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010? It's widely disliked. Finding 0.5 star, 1 star, and 1.5 star reviews on Rotten Tomatoes was much easier than finding 5-star reviews. With the other movies that I talked about, it was very different. There was probably at least an even mix, if not heavily skewed towards positive. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010 has always been divisive, from the day that it came out. Calling out some things that were never really explicit about Freddy Krueger to truly make him reprehensible was definitely unnecessary. Trying to give us a tease that we were going to have some twist when you ultimately won't deliver on it is kind of bullshit. Heavily relying on CGI for a character design that is so iconic is awful, unforgivable. Having your final girl in this movie be somebody that could give a shit less about being here is also reprehensible. There's a lot about this movie to genuinely have complaints about. I'm somebody that lands like right in the middle with it. If I was doing a 5-star rating, I'd probably give it 3 stars. I'd say it's a smidge above average for me. I have a good time with A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, warts and all, and believe me, those warts are very prevalent throughout this movie. If you notice when I was reading a lot of these negative reviews, a lot of the time I would say, yeah, that's fair, I can't argue with that. I guess I have nostalgia for this movie because it was the first Nightmare film I had the chance to see in the theater, as well as me going in at the time, I wasn't a huge Freddy person, so I didn't have that nostalgia for Robert in my head going into this film. I wasn't really clouded by that. I didn't feel offended by a lot of these things. As I got older and I learned more about A Nightmare on Elm Street and obviously saw all the movies and really fell in love with that franchise, I still have love for the remake. And not love in the sense of like Freddy's Revenge, which is my favorite Nightmare movie, but I've got a soft spot for it. You know, some of you guys will tell me in the comment section sometimes you're like that with Halloween Resurrection. So this is my Halloween Resurrection, I guess. All of these things that people say about it that are bad, they're not wrong. But I kind of love those flaws. I will say, though, there are objectively some good things in this movie. Jackie Earle Haley is good. Katie Cassidy is good. Kyle Gallner is really good. The Micronaps was such a cool addition. The imagery in this movie is solid a lot of the time. Whereas the CGI is really bad with Freddy, it's actually really good when it's used in the dream world. I love the color palette of this movie. Samuel Bayer being a music video director, I actually think lended itself positively to this film. I like the rendition of the score for this movie. It's very haunting and I like it quite a bit. Some of the kills in this movie are great. And at the end of the day, it was A Nightmare on Elm Street on the big screen for me, and that meant a lot to me. So you'll never find me arguing with people that, oh my gosh, you just have this movie completely misunderstood. There's so much deep lore and mythology and symbolism here. No, there really isn't. See, I'll go to bat for a movie like Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 because that movie does have some seriously deep themes and metaphors in it. This one really doesn't. This is surface level horror. This is very 2010s. I have a good time with it. I know why a lot of people don't, and that's okay. But I want to hear what you guys think about this video. Did you agree with a lot of these reviewers? Did you disagree? What did you like about this movie? What do you not like about this movie? Discuss it all down below in the comment section with me. Please leave a like on this video. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. This is Nick. I thank you so much for stopping at the Lost River Drive-In, but I'm pulling out.